He walked in just like any other customer, ordered a tea, sat quietly, and then he pulled out a shotgun and raised a black flag. 18 people trapped inside, phones trembling in their hands. Some whispered goodbyes, others wrote down passwords for their phone. 17 hours of terror, 2 innocent lives lost. He was out on bail, facing dozens of charges. He was known to police, free to walk in and turn a cafe into a war zone. Why wasn't he stopped? Why did this nightmare happen? It was a perfect summer morning in Sydney. December 15th, 2014, 10 days before Christmas. Martin Place was alive, shoppers rushing past, bankers grabbing lattes, tourists taking selfies by the fountains. Inside the Lindt Chocolate Café, everything felt normal. Safe, comfortable, the kind of place where nothing bad would ever happen. He ordered a tea, took a seat, watched the room. To the staff, he seemed quiet, calm, maybe even polite. But then he stood, reached into his bag and pulled out a sawn-off shotgun. The cafe froze. Then he said the words that would change everything. "This is an attack. I have a bomb." He claimed there were explosives in his bag and more hidden around the city. It wasn't true, but no one inside the cafe knew that. Over the next 17 hours, that cafe would become a cage. 18 hostages would be forced to choose between obedience and survival. And by the time it was over, 2 of them would never walk out. But this story isn't just about what happened inside the cafe. It's about what went wrong. Who hesitated, who stepped up, and who paid the ultimate price. This is a true story of the Sydney siege, and it ends with a single fatal decision. The man who walked into the cafe that morning wasn't a career terrorist. He wasn't even on the radar of Australian intelligence. His name was Haron Monis, and he was something much stranger. Born in Iran, Monis came to Australia in 1996, claiming he was being persecuted. For a while, he lived like a self-proclaimed religious leader. He called himself a spiritual healer. But the truth was, Monis was a fraud. He had a criminal record. In 2013, he was charged with being an accessory to the murder of his ex-wife, who was found stabbed 18 times and set on fire in the stairwell. He was also facing over 40 counts of sexual assault, mostly stemming from women who had come to him for spiritual guidance. And yet, Monis was still walking free, out on bail, unmonitored, free to roam, free to plan, free to walk into that cafe one summer morning with a loaded weapon and nothing to lose. In the weeks leading up to the siege, Monis was increasingly unhinged. He posted rambling messages online claiming allegiance to ISIS. He wasn't a trained jihadist. He wasn't part of any organized cell, but he was a man desperate for significance. And that desperation would turn deadly. The Lindt Café of Martin Place was once one of the busiest spots in the Sydney CBD, right in the financial district. People stopped there before work, after work, during lunch, for catch-ups and for coffee after shopping. On this particular morning, 10 staff members and 8 customers were inside. At 8:33 a.m, a man walked in wearing a black coat, white headband and carrying a blue duffel bag. He took a seat and ordered a black tea and a piece of chocolate cake. This man was Monis. Everything was normal. He was polite to the staff, and the only thing they noticed was how little of his chocolate cake he had eaten. The cafe began to fill with other customers. Then Monis requested to speak to the manager. At first, his waiter wasn't worried. She assumed he was going to make a complaint, even though she couldn't think of a reason why. But that was not what happened at all. As staff saw the man speaking to the manager, Tori Johnson, they watched as Tori's face paled. Tori called over another staff member, leaned into his ear and whispered, "Everything is going to be okay, but I need you to go get my keys and lock the doors." The staff member knew immediately that everything was not okay. At 9:44 a.m, everyone else realized what was happening. The man stood up and pulled a sawn-off pump-action shotgun from his bag and announced, "This is an attack. I have a bomb." Panic spread instantly. Monis told everyone they needed to cooperate or they would die. He removed his cap, exposing a bandana. He told the hostages Australia was under attack by the Islamic State and that it was a direct attack. He claimed he wanted to terrorize millions of Australians, but Monis had only pledged allegiance days earlier and had no real connection. Investigators later confirmed that he acted completely alone. Inside the cafe, everything changed in seconds. Monis ordered everyone to move to the windows. He told them to stand with their hands up, facing outwards, backs exposed. They were his human shields. He gave them a flag, black with white Arabic text, and ordered them to press it against the glass. Outside, people stopped and stared. At first, they didn't understand what they were looking at. Maybe a protest, a strange marketing stunt, but inside, the people knew exactly what was happening. He told them that if they tried to run, he would shoot them, and if they made it, he would shoot someone else. Hostages weren't allowed to talk, move, or open their eyes. If they did, they would die. Imagine standing there, hands pressed against the glass, forced to keep your eyes closed as a gunman paces behind you. The hostages had no idea how long they had, expecting to be shot at any moment. One of the people inside was Tori Johnson, the 34-year-old cafe manager. Tori was calm. He helped move customers where Monis directed. He stayed close to his team. He watched Monis carefully, constantly, and did what he could to de-escalate the situation. Another hostage, Katrina Dawson, was a 38-year-old barrister. She'd stopped in with a colleague for a morning tea break. Outside the cafe, heavily armed police tactical response teams took their positions. An entire city was evacuated. Monis began making demands. He selected some hostages and forced them to call media outlets, to record videos, to post on Facebook. He wanted to speak with the Prime Minister, and he had a message. He claimed to have 3 bombs planted, 1 in the cafe, 2 across the city. He said that if his demands weren't met, people would die. He wanted the world to see this as an ISIS attack, but Monis wasn't ISIS. He wasn't connected to the group. He was alone, unhinged, and unpredictable. And inside that cafe, nobody knew what he was going to do next. But not everyone was frozen by fear. John O'Brien, 84 years old, had stopped in for a coffee before visiting his wife in care. She had Alzheimer's. He visited her every single day. But now, trapped inside, John knew that if he didn't get out, she would be alone. John watched, waited. He wasn't alone. Stefan Belafutis, a young barista, was also looking for a way out. Monis had already threatened him multiple times for opening his eyes. In the 6th hour of the siege, the tension was unbearable. The temperature inside the cafe had risen. People were dehydrated, sick and silent. That's when John saw his chance. At 3:55 p.m., 6 hours after the siege began, Monis looked away. Seeing their chance, John and Stefan made a break for it. In a blur, they pushed through the door and ran. Moments later, another hostage, Paolo Vassallo, followed. Monis screamed and fired into the air. The noise cracked like a whip across the plaza, but nobody was hit. Still, Monis was furious. He turned to the remaining hostages and said, "If anyone else runs, I will shoot someone." It wasn't a bluff, but that didn't stop people from trying. At the back of the cafe, 2 staff members, Ellie Chen and April Bay, had crawled under table 40. They were close to the emergency exit, unseen and hidden. April stood silently, careful to make slow, quiet movements. She pulled the deadbolt down on the side door, opening the door carefully. Both April and Ellie made a run for it. Inside, Monis had no idea he had lost more hostages. In fact, he never once counted how many hostages he had taken. As night fell, the remaining hostages started thinking they were on their own. They had been there for more than 10 hours at that point. Outside, the 5 escaped hostages were revealing crucial information to the police. None of them could remember seeing wires coming from the bag, nor a device resembling a detonator detonator in Monis's hand. The bag was moving slightly and there was no sagging. Key indications that there was no bomb, but the command team didn't act on that information. It was never passed on to the snipers. On the roof of the Westpac building, sniper Mark Davidson had Monis in his sight. He was alone still, a perfect shot. Mark radioed to command post, sent a photo, waited for permission to fire, but the green light never came. Command was worried. What if Monis had a detonator? What if killing him triggered a bomb? So the moment passed. The shot was never taken. And inside, time kept ticking. By 2 a.m., the siege had lasted over 16 hours. Monis was unraveling. His behavior was becoming more erratic. His threats became more intense. At one moment, Monis moved to the back room away from the cafe. Hostages saw their opportunity. They took off running. As they slammed the emergency button on the sliding door, Monis reappeared. Bullets whizzed past their heads, shattering the exit sign above them. 6 hostages ran for their lives as bullets sprayed behind them. 11 hostages had now made it out. Left with just 7 hostages. Monis was agitated and hysterical. He was so panicked he didn't know what to do. He forced 2 hostages to stand on either side of him. Then he called Tori forward, told him to kneel. Tori placed his hands on his head. Then Monis pulled the trigger, executing him on the floor of his own cafe. That shot was the signal. Outside, tactical officers gave the order: breach. Flashbangs shattered the glass. Officers stormed in. 22 bullets were fired in under a minute. Monis was killed in the firefight, but so was someone else. Katrina Dawson, who had been shielding her pregnant friend, was hit by 7 fragments from police bullets that ricocheted off walls and furniture. She died within minutes. 3 other hostages were injured. 1 officer was hit by friendly fire. The silence that followed was deafening. And in the silence, Australia began to grieve. Australia was devastated. 2 innocent people, Tori and Katrina, were dead. The survivors were physically free, but emotionally shattered. Many would go on to suffer PTSD, anxiety, and long-term trauma. Public grief poured into Martin Place. Tens of thousands of flowers blanketed the plaza, candles, photos, handwritten messages. But amid the mourning came anger. Why was Monis free on bail? Why wasn't the sniper cleared to shoot? Why was critical intelligence never passed on? A coronial inquest later revealed multiple failures in communication, in policy, and in judgment. Corey Johnson was remembered as a gentle leader. He didn't fight. He didn't argue. He gave his life protecting others. He died a hero. Katrina Dawson was remembered as brilliant, a mother of 3, a woman who chose courage in her final moments. Today, the cafe is gone. In its place is a boutique wine store, but inside, a glass vase, always filled with fresh flowers, sits quietly by the door, a permanent tribute. Laws were changed, bail tightened, intelligence protocols improved. But none of it brings them back. The scariest part of this story, it didn't look like a tragedy at first. It looked like a typical day, a man sipping tea, a cafe full of chatter, a line of people ordering chocolate croissants. And just feet away sat a man with a gun, wanting to change the world. The Lindt Café siege isn't just a story about terrorism, it's a story about hesitation, failure, and the cost of indecision. But it's also about ordinary people who did extraordinary things. Courage didn't stop the bullets, but it gave the world something to remember, beyond the fear. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys in the next one.